We're both Christians. We're reflecting
Exactly.
on the incredible events that occurred 2 millennia ago on this Friday, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And our guest is Raymond Arroyo. He is, of course, a best-selling author and the host of the Arroyo Grande podcast, managing editor over at EWTN, and of course you know him from his work at Fox. Hey, Raymond, happy Easter to you. You talk about the intersection of faith and politics and culture in our country, and I think we're going to hit all of them here. Let's start, though, just with the basics. On Good Friday, for the uninitiated, or people always wonder, why do they call it Good Friday if it was such it was a terrible thing, the worst crime of all humanity, the crucifixion of the most innocent, sinless man to walk our planet. But it is actually good for Christians in our own way, isn't it?
Yeah, well, my dear friend, Father Richard John Newhouse of happy memory, would often say, he wrote a great book called Death on a Friday Afternoon about this, and would often preach on the last 7 words of Christ. And one of the great lines that I always remember on this day, he would say, "Don't rush to the resurrection. Stay here. Stay in this day that we know that though it's very, very bad, we call it good, and plunge and spend time in that moment so you understand why it's good." And it really is about appreciating the depth of the sacrifice and the pain and the suffering that Christ went through, perfection God himself went through, for the redemption of man. And it is look, I remember this day always brings so many memories, Larry. I remember standing, and it's a pity that that's the thing you remember. I mean, look, I've been to the Holy Land multiple times, but the thing I always remember this day is being on the set 20 years ago of The Passion of the Christ and watching, my friend Jim Caviezel getting, scourged in that courtyard all day long. The images of that film sort of capture the horror of this day in some ways. Yeah. And it's amazing that it feels like, in my mind, it feels like you're there because it was so well imagined.
Oh, it's
and
so
executed.
vivid. So vivid.
Yeah, it really is, and so it lingers, and it's great to hear that 20 years later they're going to complete the circle and finish the story. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Larry and I were talking earlier this morning about sort of the growing Gen Z movement back towards religion in a pretty conservative way, particularly among Catholics, seeing these big jumps in, year-over-year increases for new converts. Do you think that kind of reflects a change of the American culture or things, or are we just catching up with ourselves here?
Well, Emily, it's not only American culture. We're seeing it in France, in the UK, all reporting, and all across the United States, by the way. And here's the good news: 30 to 70% increase in the number of people who are coming into the church and asking for baptism and are going to be welcomed into the church over the weekend. That's an enormous jump. And, I've called anecdotally bishops and priests I know, and they all tell me the majority of the people coming in are young men. So there's something happening there. Clearly something is shifting and changing. Young men, I think, are looking for answers. I think they're looking, I'm going to do some of this on Ingram's show tonight. I think they're looking for models of what does it look like to be a male today? What are you supposed to be as a man? What are your obligations? Morally, what are you called to? And I don't think the world is providing answers for that. So they've kind of fallen into the arms of the church. And to tell you the truth, the internet film has become a powerful vehicle for that. That's how they sort of discovered the history of the faith, which is what's drawing them initially, it seems. Anyway, they're looking for something that's lasting and eternal beyond the chaos and and frankly, the assault on manhood that they see around them every day.
Let's turn to politics. Sometimes it's hard to sort of be a political conservative in America and also follow many of the, if not doctrines of the church, certainly the strong encouragement and teachings of the Catholic Church that transcend American political boundaries. And I think that that's highlighted mostly recently here in this country with regard to illegal immigration and how Catholic charities have been sort of, I think, part of the problem in terms of being a magnet for people and making a lot of federal money over the migrant and refugee resettlement programs. What do you make of the announcement last week from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops that they will no longer participate in that program and they're not going to be making that federal money? Is it because the Trump administration basically has shut it down?
Yeah, they cut the funds off. When you cut the funding off, you can't do it anymore. Look, Larry, you and I talked about this years ago. I remember being on your show. You know, I was down at Eagle Pass. I saw for myself at 3 a.m. they would bring these poor migrants and women and children, hundreds of them, across the Rio Grande at night and at an appointed time, by the hundreds, children. These are all people who are paying these cartels to move them, and Border Patrol would basically check them in, put them in a bus, and take them where? To Catholic charities, where they would be processed a second time, given a manila envelope with tickets to wherever they were going. And then the next 2 days later, I'm leaving town. I'm in McAllister at the airport. Guess who's surrounding me and on the plane with me? Many of the people I saw cross the Rio Grande at 3 a.m. and they've got the little manila envelopes with their children. And so I thought, oh my, what is happening here? I quickly found out hundreds of millions of dollars in grant money every year given to Catholic charities, Lutheran charities, basically the government washing its hands of, like Pontius Pilate, of bringing these immigrants illegally into the country and resettling them. So now the Trump administration has basically said, whoa, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not giving you money to do this anymore. Well, that's why you saw the caterwauling from everybody, from the Bishops' Conference, from Rome, because we're talking really billions of dollars, because they weren't only giving it to Catholic charities, they were giving it to individual Catholic charities in dioceses all over the United States. So the monies that were being offered here are enormous. So yeah, Trump cut the spigot off, and they simply could no longer afford to keep the staff going. So, but what they were doing is basically
it's a bad look for Catholic charities. It was a bad look because it actually put people in danger.
They claim they were helping people in distress, and I get that. But what you're really doing is facilitating you're really the last hand of the cartel. You're handing them taking them from the Rio Grande and delivering them to the mainland United States, where they were now in slave labor for the cartel in whatever locality they were dropped in.
Yep.
That is
and I
horrible.
think they were addicted.
It's horrible.
They were addicted to that money, and they made bad decisions because of the money, which, by the way, is sadly part of the history of our church. We've done some bad things for money in the past. It is an institution run by men, and they're sinful.
Well, I think part of it, that's very true. But part of it is, I think in their mind, they're helping people come here. Look, I know people who worked for that office, which is now basically closed down. But they thought they were helping people in distress and, putting a hand out. But my question is, how is this saving souls if you're forcing people into slave labor for years and years once they come here, which is basically what was happening? And the other part of it is, I don't see how that saves souls. Really, I
agree. Well said. Well, listen, we've got a lot to. We've all got a lot to reflect on this weekend, and while you're reflecting, everyone out there, you should check out the Arroyo Grande podcast because you interviewed Jim Caviezel from Passion of the Christ. It's you grab it on YouTube. It's a great way to find it. He's a fascinating guy, and I have not seen this interview exchange between the two of you, but I bet it's fantastic. So I'm looking forward to it.
No, it's a lot of fun. He was very candid. I mean, for the first time, he talks about not only what he went through on the Passion, some of which we've heard before, some you haven't. Like I did. Look, I've known Caviezel a long time. I did not realize that his work on the Passion, getting struck by lightning, the hypothermia he experienced on the cross. I mean, this wasn't shot in a studio. They shot it on a hillside in Matera, and they put him up on the cross 4 days. And as a result of that, he had serious heart problems that led to not one but two open heart surgeries. The second one at the Cleveland Clinic, he flatlined. So he died on the table. And he talks about that. So really, this was his resurrection, which has already happened in some ways. So it's kind of cool that this guy is, again, getting a shot, as he says, his last shot, at playing this role again.
He doesn't have the stigmata, does he? Because that would be taking it too far. Please.
Well, that we don't know yet.
All right, we'll take a look at it.
I'll keep you in suspense, Larry.
Raymond Arroyo, have a good Friday. Be contemplative.
Good Friday to you,
and
thank you,
and I can't wait for our joyous Easter this Sunday. Thanks, Raymond.